Alright, this is episode 6 of the Untitled Hockey Game devlog. First off, before I get to the updates, I'd like to talk about the upload frequency here. As you may remember, I didn't put out an episode in December because of Christmas, so I put off episode 5 until January, and I was hoping to have this episode finished for mid-February, but it's already the 18th as I record this. So I think from now on, I'm probably going to upload every couple of months, which should help me focus on actually making the game, as well as making sure that the updates are meaningful instead of just putting it out an episode every month no matter what. You know, the original idea of monthly uploads was just to force myself to stay on task, so maybe it's a bad idea now that I've broken that streak to start doing every other month or whatever, but I think at this point it's doing more to distract me from the game than it is to keep me focused on it. So if you don't hear from me for a few months or so, don't worry, I didn't abandon the game. But to make up for that, I'm going to try and post more on my Twitter at CadetBrettBot instead of just when I have a new video out. Okay, so for the past month, I was supposed to be focusing on getting the whole game to a playable state. So how close am I realistically to releasing the first playtest? Well, that's a tough question that I don't want to put a solid date on. Even while writing the script, in fact, I found more bugs that were unexpectedly breaking things. But looking at my roadmap, here's what I've got left at a bare minimum. I want teams, including the player, to be able to release players once they're signed. I don't want the game to be soft locked because a team needs to sign a player and they can't. And that's not even unrealistic because guaranteed contracts were not a thing back then anyways. And then number 2, right now players start to retire once they pass age 35, but no new players are ever added to the free agent pool besides guys released from the NIHL. So I have to make a system to add new players at the end of every year, which shouldn't be too difficult. I can just base it on the code that I use to generate players at the beginning of the game anyways. That's it as far as absolute must-haves to make the base game itself playable. Of course, there's a ton more that I want to do, but if I get those 2 things working, I can at least put up a build of the game on itch or something and ask people to start playtesting it. So, having said that, probably the biggest update for this episode is that I've rewritten the schedule logic. As I mentioned in the last episode, I was already working on making the Players League and the AI League both function the same behind the scenes. At the end of the last episode, during the regular season, the Player League's games were kept in a global calendar, but the AI League was just auto-simmed on alternating days. But during the playoffs, the games for the NIHL, as I call it for short, were added to the regular calendar just like the Player League. So it was fairly simple to extend that, working backwards, to treat both leagues the same. Now, both leagues, regular season and playoffs, are all scheduled the same and added to one master schedule. And the games are simulated the same, which obviously makes it much easier on me. Now I can just have one genericized function to simulate any game, and the only difference is where the stats are saved. Another huge change is that the NIHL players are now signed for a randomized 1 to 3 years at the start of the game. That means that some of the best players in the game will get released from the NIHL every year, giving you a chance to sign them. You can probably guess what that means. I had a ton of work to do rewriting the entire code for teams to pick a free agent, assign him to their roster, make a stat array entry, remove him from the free agent list, update their own lineup, and update the GM's brain. Now you get the first crack at the free agent list, then the leagues are sorted by their level. Since the NIHL starts out a level above you, each one of those teams gets to sign a free agent in random order. Then finally the game moves on to your league and all of your opponents get to sign a free agent. This might sound like you have a huge advantage because you always get first crack at the best available player, but things quickly fall off from best available to 8th best with your second contract offer. And if I fix the code so former NIHLers can demand more than $1,000 per season, you'd have to think hard about spending more than a fifth of your budget on just one guy out of 6 or 7. Related to that contract stuff, I do have to admit that I wasted a fair amount of time this month on making contracts delayed. The idea was that you or any other team could offer any free agent a contract, and they would take a few days to think about it. Whenever their thinking time was over, the free agent would check all current contract offers. If only you offered them anything, or your offer was the best, they would just sign with you. If the AI offered them a better contract, you would get the opportunity to either match that offer or let them go. And I actually got the system working, at least for the players' team, before I realized that this would be more complicated than I initially expected. For example, what if you had a game today and you had no subs on the bench and a player got injured? You would need to sign a player right now in order to simulate the day's game, but they would want to take a few days to think about it. So I would have to add a catch every day to check the teams that are playing that day and expedite their decision-making process. So anyways, eventually I realized that this is going to cause a bunch of unforeseen problems like that. So, since I'm trying to remain focused on releasing the first playtest, demo, whatever you want to call it, I decided to go back to instant contracts for now. I believe I mentioned before that the playoffs are a 3-game series, and I have some code to track how many goals are scored as a tiebreaker in case each team earns 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 tie. If wins and goals are tied after 3 games, I have code to schedule another game, and then it's rechecked after game 4, and so on and so on. But I realized this month that I had made a mistake in my code, and unless game 4 was a tie too, it's always awarded the win, and thus the series, to whoever was home in game 4. And since the first place team has home ice advantage, that means it was always the second place team. Oops, my bad. But after seeing a 0-0 tie in the playoffs, I began to wonder if I should have ties in the playoffs at all. On the one hand, ties feel very old school, and I already wrote all that code to track goals scored and schedule games and stuff. But on the other hand, I know the NHL had overtime in real life because they changed the rules to limit it to 20 minutes in 1921. So I split the difference and put in the equivalent of 30 minutes of sudden death overtime for playoffs only. And I say equivalent because I don't yet track the clock in game, which might lead you to wonder how I do sim the games then. So currently, the games are made up of 100 chances, and which team has the advantage each chance is randomly assigned. So the OT in playoffs is up to another 50 chances. Think of them like possessions or scoring chances. About half of them don't result in a shot on net because the defender breaks up the play, so you usually wind up with a reasonable 20 or 30 shots for each team per game. But there's room for randomness, of course, so a team might have an off night and only get 10 or 15 shots, or they might have a great game and pour 40 plus shots on goal. Way back when I was working on a Python version of this game, I did write a prototype that tracked the whole 60 minutes in 1 to 3 second intervals, but rewriting the game sim is going to be a big project, so I'm holding off on that for a while. Alright, I'm going to call it there and get back to work. As a reminder, the devlogs are going to slow down here, but that doesn't mean that work isn't continuing. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be a big help. And check me out on Twitter @CadetBrettBot. Alright, I'll catch y'all next time.